Good evening to everybody. I don't do a lot of speaking, so forgive me. When I told some friends I was doing this, they said, "Oh my God, those poor people. You'll be vortexing them," because often if I'm at a dinner party, I have this dreadful habit of talking to somebody and not letting go of them for the whole evening, and they have various friends coming along saying, "Are you okay?" So there is a door you can get out. I think it's over there. So if you want to escape, I won't be upset. The lecture is, or not a lecture, the talk is about light and landscape, and I'm going to turn it around a little bit it's not really about light and landscape. I happen to work in the landscape. It's really about inspiration, and it's about, I'm always intrigued as an artist what inspires other artists and, well, other people. So this is really trying to give you a little bit of an idea of who I am and where I grew up and the sort of things that inspired me. And my whole reason for doing what I do now came to me when I was about 40, which was a number of years ago now. My father died, and at that time I suddenly thought, I wanted to do something worthwhile with my life, and I realized that the art, I always thought that art was something that was very self-indulgent, and I suddenly thought, it shouldn't be, you shouldn't feel like that about it. So I started to think about the things in my life that made me feel happy, and it was as simple as that. And then I suddenly realized that over the years, as Carrie explained, I've kept journals, sketchbooks since I was a little kid. And I realized that I'd noted moments of happiness in these books. They weren't me trying to make bits of art, they were just little moments of connection with the world around me. And I suddenly thought, well, there's my subject matter. And actually then I started to refer to the subject matter to try and create pieces of work that would allow people to hopefully connect with that and see the world in a slightly more positive point of view. And I think, particularly at the moment, we all need a lot of that. So starting off, I grew up in two places. My parents were divorced, and my father and my grandfather grew up in a beautiful place. I don't know if any of you know, in the South Hams in South Devon, called Salcombe. My brother, sister and I used to get the train down from Essex across London, and it was such a joy to see that harbour. It really filled my heart with joy, and I still feel very joyous when I go there. And as a little kid, I used to spend hours sitting watching the water. There was a local artist there who could paint figuratively very well, and of course when you're about 7 or 8, all you want to do is paint things like they look like. And I used to look at the water, go and sit on these steps, looking at the water, and try and memorize it, and then go back. And that was something I did when I was about 8 or 9. And I always thought it was a crap painting, but later on, when I got older, I went, do you know, it's probably the best painting I ever did. Because what it showed me was I was extremely, I felt the water, and you can see a little sort of kid there pushing the paint around, trying to make it, because I thought if you moved paint like water, it might look like it. I think we all hope that. And obviously you learn the tricks of the trade. So I'm going on now to when I was 25. There's a bit of a jump here. And the reason I'm saying this, I was in Sydney at 24, and doing all those jobs that Carrie referred to, bricklaying and aerobics thing. I was a lot skinnier then and all those things. But I saw an advertisement an article in a magazine, which was on an advertising agency called Saatchi & Saatchi. And I thought, gosh, those guys look like they have fun, because they all were driving fast cars. And then in those days, I thought, well, it would be nice to have a fast car. But anyway, so I went to this agency, and I knew I couldn't get in there because I was, I didn't have the qualifications. So I made a little jack-in-the-box with lights, put it in the lift, sent it up in the lift, and I eventually luckily got a call from them, and I went to work with them. to do a course. And while I was doing the course, this art director said to me, Bruce, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, look, I've just finished art school. I have no idea, but I just want to come up with things, create things. And he said, your trouble is you're a bit of a butterfly. That's why I've got this picture here. It was the rudest thing anybody at 25 could have said. When I was 25, I'm not a bloody butterfly. But it was the best thing, actually, because I then focused. I thought, I need to do something, because my mind is all over the place. I have lots of ideas. And I thank God for that fellow, because I then was walking past a shop and I saw some light. It was a light product, and it caught my imagination, and that led me spending the next 4 or 5 years in Australia running a little business and learning about a particular light product. I'm now going to go forward another 8 years, and I was with my lovely wife Serena, who's there, and just before we left Australia, we decided to do what all Brits do, go on a grand tour. So we bought an old banger and put a tent in the back and spent the next 5 months travelling around. The Aussies have been banging on about Uluru, which is the centre of Australia, and they always say, you've got to go to Uluru. And I thought, if another person says it, I'll strangle them. Anyway, we went there, and it was an incredibly powerful place. By that time, we got rid of all the booze out of our car, so it was a completely honest appreciation to the experience of the place. This is Serena and I on Uluru. You can't do that now, and probably we shouldn't have done it then, but in those days it wasn't such a bad thing, because it's actually a sacred rock. While I was there, in my sketchbook, I just had this idea, and I don't know if you've ever been to a desert, but deserts are incredibly fertile places. I know that they're barren in the sense of climatically, because there's, when it doesn't rain and you don't see a plant or an insect, and then when it rains, it just becomes a veritable Eden. And that went into my book, and it led to this piece of work called the Field of Light. And the reason I put this on the first one is because it's the first. This was about the passion coming through into my sketchbooks. It was something I really wanted to do. It took me, we were there in 92, it took me another 10 years to save up the money to actually make it. And Serena and I bought where we live now, a house, a little bit naughty. I was thinking, I've got to do this. We bought the house with the field. I knew what I wanted the field for. I didn't tell Serena, so I was a little bit naughty about that. But and then we had a mortgage, like we all do. So the last bit of the mortgage actually went to do this. Serena said, what are you doing? And I said, don't worry, I know it's going to work out. I promise you it'll work out. So she's a very trusting person. And people we didn't tell anybody, they started coming along to it. And what moved me about this piece of work and made me realise I was on the right track, there was a lady who came up to the field one day who wasn't very well, and she said, her friend wasn't very well. Her friend came one day and she grabbed me by the hand when she got out of the car and burst into tears. And I thought I'd done something wrong, and then she said, thank you very much. Now, it wasn't the thank you, it was just I'd suddenly realised that I'd actually done something that could actually move somebody in such a strong way. And I felt this is what art's about. It's actually about trying to create something where you connect with another person. So moving on, we moved with that piece of work it's my touchstone. So I suddenly people started asking me to do it in other places. At this time, I was working as a lighting designer and lighting gardens and houses, but this was the type of work I wanted to do. So we've been very lucky and invited to put it in some interesting places. At the moment, I'm working in a lot of botanical gardens and museums in the States and in the UK. And it's not just this piece of work. I've very fortunately been able to take other pieces of work. I'm just finishing a residency at Waddesdon Manor at the moment. It's my 4th year. This year will be my last one. So, well, as I said, I have lots of interesting opportunities, and over the years, clients have asked me to do, come up with things for their houses or their land. And this piece of work was it was an amazing lodge in a place called Curated in the Highlands of Scotland. In the middle there's a sort of slit window. And one day I was sitting on these stairs thinking, what the hell am I going to do here? And it rains in Scotland a lot, and all this rain was pouring down the window. And then I suddenly, in my mind, I went, oh, light, it just came to me. So I created this piece of work, Light Shower, that developed from there, and then this was an iteration we did at Salisbury Cathedral. So it's one thing leads to another. Talking about inspiration, now you go to lots of different spaces, and I've been very fortunate to work in botanical gardens, in several countries, and this piece of work here was it was a desert biome, and in the desert, my immediate reaction when I walked into this space, it was quite bland, but it was dry. You could feel by the air in this biome, and you get these vortexes of air going across a desert. So, and it's called a chindi. And so all I wanted to do, it's very simple. There's nothing deep and meaningful about this. I just wanted to try and create a light vortex. The chickens. Now, Serena keeps chickens, and they were getting eaten by the fox. And a local farmer came along one day, and he said, I've got a little trick up my sleeve I can show you. And he took an old redundant fluorescent tube and put it on a 12-volt battery with an electric fence charger, and it created this amazing flash of light. So that went into my sketchbook, and we came up with this piece. It's a sort of kinetic piece, so you have to... The reason I put that on is because a lot of people don't quite, they look at the fluorescent tubes and they go, well, what's that all about? But what I'm saying is the inspiration came from, you never know where your inspiration's coming from. And that was this, as I said, this guy that, this was another piece of work we did, which was a light wave, and that was kinetic as well. It's about a space will inform what I do. So, for example, this was a beautiful walkway, which unfortunately you can't see, but it was on some wetlands in the States, and I just wanted to, and it was by some water, and I just felt that I could play this game and create this wave of light. But this inspiration here, minor words, again, I've got a very infantile sense of humour, and this was in an aviary at Waddesdon, and I'd always been slightly intrigued by those sort of cartoon bubbles, when you see, and it's also what do birds do, Dr. Dolittle type of thing, I've loved the concept that animals can talk to each other, and I just wanted to sort of create some amusing idea between them, the sort of speech bubbles of what they might be saying. And that followed on. This is an iteration we did this year. We lived in Australia, as I said, and we were woken up. I spent 8 years of being woken up by these ghastly birds. In fact, I came to love, and cockatoos, kookaburras, galahs, And it occurred to me, and I particularly love this. This is a great piece of Australian design, the Hills Hoist. And I particularly love that. I mean, how many ladies would like that for Christmas? I once bought Serena an ironing board and never again. But I think that if I'd bought her a Hills Hoist, I would probably be hanging on it now. But the cockatoos, it occurred to me, I was having a gin and tonic in Greece, and this is how the idea came up. I saw some clothes pegs in the corner of my eye, and maybe I only had a couple of them. So these clothes pegs, and I suddenly thought they looked like birds, and when I turned around, they were clothes pegs. So I suddenly thought, well, if I could actually make a species, and I did a bit of research on the Google, which I think is a wonderful instrument, because I suddenly found out there were 14 indigenous cockatoos in Australia. So what we did, this is actually a sound light piece, so I'm afraid I won't play the soundtrack to you, but I taped 14 of the bird calls, and then each one was on each Hills Hoist, and you've got this cacophony of sound and light. I just love these things that are slightly quirky, and people are probably going, what the heck's this all about? But it's just a bit of fun. Moon harvest is such a simple thing. You know, we live in the country. I look at these bales all the time, and I just love the way, you know, I see the moon rising as we all do, and I just love that idea of, you know, changing two words around, so harvest moon to moon harvest, and I wondered, what would a field full of moons? I mean, the opportunity for me has been great in the last few years because I've been able to play around with sort of just very simple visual ideas. In the botanical gardens, you're faced with lots of different environments, and this is a tropical biome. I'm very interested in componentry and the way that things are made. So this is really me being a little bit of a train spotter, and these little components here, they're made up of tiny little Lego bricks. I think I just wanted to be a Lego designer, and it's also my first foray into soft printing. You know, these wonderful machines that you can now design with, that you can get things made from powders with lasers. It's incredible. I mean, if they'd had that when I was a kid, I mean, you know, I'm sort of in my 50s now. I so wish I would have been 20. I mean, children today, it must be just being at a sweet shop, being able to design all this stuff. This is a very early piece, but again, it really put it in there to show a passion. I was doing a fairly mundane job if I say this, it sounds, I was in the Caribbean, but it was quite boring because, you know, I was working on a building site and people, you know, my wife used to go, oh, you're off on holiday again, I suppose. And, you know, I was saying, well, yeah, you try walking around a building site and you're seeing everybody in the sea having fun, and you're kind of walking around sweating buckets. And anyway, in the evening, I decided I wanted to make something. So I took out a bag of silane sticks with me and then tied them to bits of coral. I just thought it was fun to do. This piece is very important to me. It's called the Metabhavana. It's a concept building that I had when I was about 40, had a bit of a midlife crisis. I think it's probably around the time my father died. And I started to do quite a lot of meditation. And this is actually named after a meditation. It's a compassionate meditation. And the concept behind the building is more interesting than the story in a sense, because I designed the building so that it could be lit with sunlight in the day and candlelight at night. And the light comes through these. There are 3 water pools around here. There are these lenses that take the light into the building during the day, and then at night we use the light from within the building to light up the sails. It's something I'd really love to build one day, because whatever religion we all are, it was the one prayer I learned that you could learn, you could teach anybody in 5 minutes. It's just about being loving kindness towards yourself, to your friends, and to your enemies, and to the world at all. And there's no kind of religious overtones, that you don't have to know anything more than that. Passion, again, this is a very early piece. This is a beach that I used to go to as a kid in Sydney, and I say kid, in my 20s. And I had a day when I was a little bit miserable. I hadn't met my wife at the time. I was living on my own, missing my family. And because my father lived in Salcombe by the sea, I used to go and stick my hand in the water sometimes. It sounds a bit weird, but I felt it was like a telephone. I could put my hand in the water and I felt it could go all the way around. And I was sitting by the sea, and the sea was blazing with light, just like this. So years later, when I wanted to try and express that I had that notation in my sketchbook, and I thought, how do I do this? Do I paint a picture of the sea? And then I realized, actually, what I wanted to do was to create a sea. So what we did is, I saw a CD as a sort of like a big sequin, and I thought, well, I need a lot of CDs because this is our field, and I worked out I needed 1 million CDs. So I thought, oh my God, that's going to be a bit of a job to collect those. Anyway, we got up to 600,000, and I realised actually that if I moved the CDs a little bit further apart, I could make it work. So, that moment of finishing that piece of work was very important to me, because it took me back to all those years before, when I was this 24-year-old, slightly missing my home and feeling a bit down in the dumps, and then coming away from that experience feeling, but the light of the sea made me feel whole again, and I suddenly thought, God, that's like transporting this emotion from all those years back and recreating it in a different way for the present. Music, music and books have played a great deal in my life. I was a very slow reader as a kid, but I've loved reading. It might take me a lot longer than most people, but I do love it. And I was invited to Waddesdon to do this residency, and I was so excited when they said, Bruce, come and do this. I was driving back in the car, put Radio 3 on, this composer called Rotavara, he's a Finnish composer, came on, and this piece of music just filled my head with an image. And it's weird, it just happens like that. Sometimes it can be because maybe my mind was thinking on these vast lawns, and I'd just seen these lawns had, Sotheby's had a sculpture exhibition there, and they'd had these huge sculptures on the lawns, and I just thought, God, the lawns just swallow up you've really got to do something quite large to make it work. And then I just looked at the kind of the design of the lawns, and it's very basic and hard, and I realized the answer was a very simple, and this is called Angel of Light, which is actually after the piece of music. This piece was actually informed by the topography, if that's the right word, of the landscape. There is this natural amphitheatre, and when I walked in there and I saw it, and it's surrounded by trees, for some reason I saw it as a big platter. I just thought moon on a silver platter. I don't know why. Again, why I'd think of a moon on a silver platter, God only knows. But so they're just very quick, visceral reactions to space. Some of these pieces are, again, this is my infantile sense of humour. When I was a child, brass monkeys was what little schoolboys used to say to each other when a certain part of their anatomy was a bit cold. And what amused me was when I started to learn that on fighting ships you'd have cannonballs that were stacked up in nines, and there's a hoop called a monkey, and apparently when it freezes, the balls fall off, hence freeze the balls off a brass monkey. But actually that's a load of bollocks. Sorry, it's a complete... there's no truth to that at all. If you go on Google, you find it's one of those myths. But again, this was for I was asked to do a commission for a hospital, the RUH, for the cancer ward, and I wanted to do something that was going to put a little bit of light onto their, not to be too serious, because, cancer's a pretty serious thing. So I thought maybe they could sort of, a little bit of light, entertainment, whatever. Again, this is this wonderful composer, Rotavara. This is called Cantus Arcticus, and it's the most, if you get the opportunity, please listen to it. What's interesting about his music is he was composing in the 70s, and it was this combination of sort of classical orchestral music with, he was overlaying bird sounds. And when I first listened to this, you are there in the northern climes, in sort of Arctic tundra. And what goes through your mind when somebody goes the Arctic? You think Aurora Borealis, and obviously I had this this very simple symbol here. When you're a kid and you draw a bird is like that. So I always try to reduce it down to a very, very simple visual format. And I realized that actually by taking that two-dimensional bird form, that I could create a curtain of light. And then what this is, again, it's a bit difficult for you to appreciate it, but it's a sound piece. So we choreographed his sound with this. So you walk through it and it's sort of veils of light. Very, very important book for me, Kim, by Rudyard Kipling. It was, there's the last bit of the book, which is when the old lama, I don't know if probably lots of you read it, but there's this old lama who dies, well not dies, he sort of collapses in a stream, and it's where the arrow stream, whatever, where Buddha is meant to fired an arrow, where it landed, this stream of enlightenment comes out. Anyway, I've just loved that. So I had an opportunity to visualize this. Now, this is in Longwood Gardens, and they very kindly planted this wonderful blue flower, and that's about 100 meters. I know it doesn't look it there, but and we had that all sort of, there's a sort of spring there, and it sort of flowed down this hill. Again, this was another fun book that I was given. I was working in this restaurant when I was about 21 as a student thing, and I had a mad chef who was a lady who was a painter, and she gave me this book called Gifts of Unknown Things. And I won't bore you with the details, but this led to a piece called Water Towers, which we first created at Salisbury Cathedral. Again, it's a sound light piece. One of the things about this I really, well, particularly for young artists, is that I used to try and make things very expensively. So I used to make things and design them expensively and then go, can't do it because it costs too much money. And then I realized, started to work out that you actually want to take material, you've got to be aware of what you can afford to do sometimes. And then I was in the supermarket one day and I looked at a bottle of water and realized that it was intrinsically a very beautiful object. It did all the optical things I wanted it to do, and it had a structural stability. So there's 16,000 bottles in this installation. And it has a presence in the day, as you can see, and there is a sound that moves through it. I've met this really wonderful composer called Orlando Goff, who I do with this particular installation. I love his music because he creates music for the voice, and he has a choir of voices from all over the world. So they could be operatic, they could be country folk, they could be jazz, rock. And he has one or two from each genre, and they all come together with his beautiful compositions. Children's books. The C.S. Lewis Narnia Chronicles always got me as a kid, loved them. And one thing that got me was, I loved odd words. Now, Parliament of Owls, I just think that's such a crazy idea, because obviously Parliament to an English person it just gets into your brain, and I just thought of all these stuffy old, guys, girls, ladies, and somebody brought a lens into my studio one day, and I looked at it and I went, God, that's just like an owl's eye. And then this piece of work, again, this is kinetic, so you won't really see it like this. And this is the iconic lamppost. I don't know if people know the Narnian ones, but there's a lamppost in the wood in the first book, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. But in the fifth book, The Magician's Nephew, there's this bit where the land of Narnia grew. There was a time when anything that you planted grew from it. And I love the idea that the lamppost, when it was originally a seed. And it also stands for very good things. It's about goodness, and I just, I'm a big child, so I made it. Again, slightly infantile. I did this for my children, Roald Dahl, Whiz Pops, and these are more kind of designed pieces which I was doing a number of years ago, which have now moved on. My work's changed a bit. Again, for those who are old enough might remember Nasha. Again, it's being slightly, irreverent to things. These were just bits of material that I had in my workshop, and I love designing different components. This component here was specially made. There's lots of things that I make, widgets, that I enjoy designing and making. It's slightly more, and it's horses for courses. I think sometimes a space needs a certain type of approach, where you just have to be very gentle and subtle with it. And this is really to show you all that you don't have to draw terribly well to do what you want to do. This is very important to me. Why you do things. Well, that was a family holiday that I had. I had this lovely memory with my eldest daughter when she was about 8. And we were on this beach in Bantham in Devon. And I was holding her hand and we were rock pooling. When the tide goes out, you get this big beach and there's depressions in the sand. And this is called Beach Without Sand. And all I wanted to do was try and recreate that moment. So I worked out a way that we could cast the sand. I had a very good friend who was an artist as well. He did all the clever stuff, casting, and then I went to another artist's studio to cast it in glass, and then we've just recreated it. And that again is a slightly kinetic thing. I went to America very late on in life. I mean, first time I was about 40. And I was so surprised by New York, the verticality of the city. And I came back. All I wanted to do was to create this is an installation I did. It's called Boogie Woogie, which, if you think about New York, you think about jazz, you think about the verticality of the city. And I was quite interested in dance and notation. And I wanted to sort of create the top of the tower there, the way these optics are dropped. This was the prototype piece, but when you look at dance, when it's actually notated, there is actually a visual form of it. And I'm always interested in the way you can take a two-dimensional image and then you can turn it into a three-dimensional form. And I wanted it to be in this sort of glass, it's not glass, sorry, this rectangular tower that was a bit bigger than people. So it's like building a Lilliputian city. The idea with this is that you can weave there will be 69 of these towers that you weave your way through. Again, this just shows people why, I was an odd kid, I guess, and my parents in those days had a black and white telly, and I was listening to Carry On Up the Khyber, which is one of those terrible films, the sort of slapstick English humour, and I remember taping that film. And years later, I made this piece. It's called Restless Fakir. It's just slightly, there was a little man who goes and lies on that bed of nails. And I just love that. And I'm kind of like taking the balance between a very highly engineered piece of, material and then putting it on an old sleeper. That's one of our kids' beds. But I just love that idea of playing around. It's really like writing poetry, but with stuff. This was a wonderful Korean artist who I came across quite recently, called Kim Vanki, and he, when I looked at this piece of work, or his paintings, it reminded me of Morse code, or some form of calligraphy, and that gave me a huge amount of inspiration, and actually it's my work at the moment for about a year and a half has been following this line. Morse code is not only just the written dot dash notation, but there is also the equivalent in flashing light. So rather obviously, the first piece I did, we displayed or exhibited, it was a tower, and what we did is we actually took Morse code and flashed it through the tower. It was an exhibition by the sea in America, and so we could actually communicate messages across the harbour to people. But then I suddenly thought, actually, there's a more beautiful way of doing this. And this is one of my favourite books by Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha. And again, it's a small piece of writing by a river. And it's the analogy that by the river, everything in life is by this river. And you can just imagine yourself sitting by a river with that flicker of light, a little bit like the CDC. And this is, there's actually, this is an animation of it. Try to imagine yourself just standing by a river. Now, all the text of that is in that. So every line has that whole text running through. So every line and we put mirrors there so you get that flash of light on your face. So this is another piece of work which is, it's called Snow Code. And again, it amused me when the Inuit have about 14 words for snow. In fact, again, it's like brass monkeys. It's when you go into these things, you realise it's not as interesting as it sounds. But what I did is we transposed the instead of doing dot dash, we did a bigger dot for a dash, and then so it still reads, and then that actually animates like a snowfall. So you can actually, I don't know, it's creating something. This is a piece I did at Salisbury Cathedral recently. It's again an animated piece. It takes the I think it's. Gosh, I forget the chapter, whatever it's Luke or it's Matthew verses chapter 2, 1 to 12, I think. But again, each spoke has the text that comes out. What I love is actually having something buried into the image that if you really want to know more about it, you can. Otherwise, it's just a visual a visual, hopefully something that is visually pleasing. But what was interesting about this piece was that there were a lot of docents who look after the cathedral. They were there, and they were there standing around, and they were actually deciphering the Morse code, which was rather lovely. This, again, is another of those wonderful C.S. Lewis books. And I was asked to do a piece for Bath Spa University and have a go on their media wall, which was really good fun. And just to explain, this is called In Between Worlds, and it's a wonderful space which it's like a portal that you go in the C.S. Lewis books, where you can go from one world to another. And what I always loved about reading this, it was very sort of, it's a soporific space. You feel always sleepy, and it was full of light and trees and water reflections. And when I went to this Bath Spa place, the light, I was seeing the screens without anything on it, but I noticed the slats, the light coming through the windows. And this is what I mean. Sometimes space informs an idea. And with these vertical wooded slats. So I thought, I'm going to build a forest. The reason, and it worked well in the space because there was actually a mid-line here between the screens, which gave me my reflective opportunity. So what happens is, I'll play a film for you, and then you can see for yourselves. The only word we wrote in Morse code was the word light. So the light is coming down in shafts. So I'm going to just finish with a last few pieces. I've had a lot of luck, and I've been very fortunate to be able to do this work over the last number of years. And I always felt that we, like everybody, when you're running a little studio, it's nice to try and give back. Now, we don't have huge amounts of money, but what we do have is imagination, and we can create things. And over the years, I've worked out that art is a great way to bring people together for events that can maybe support charities and things. So we're a kind of cement, I guess. There's probably a better word for it. Anyway, this was a fun piece we did for Help for Heroes. It was called Star Turn. It was my idea of what a bee celebrity might ride, because that we're in such a celebrity-conscious world where that idea of wanting to look at yourself in a mirror with lights, that kind of thing. And I thought, well, when they go back home on their exercise bike, do they actually have lights on them? So that's what. And we built this rather Heath Robinson contraption, and it was fun doing it. And the next one, I was at the Holborn Museum, and a very nice lady came up to my daughter, and who was originally from Australia, and we got chatting, and she said, I said, "What do you do?" And she said, "I run a cancer charity in London called Cancerkin," and it was a fantastic charity, and so we built a beacon for them, and we had a fun week or day. We built it on a hill, and then they used this piece of work to get people to sponsor them to support their charity. And then this is the final one. You'll be glad to know. This is something I'm doing this September in Salcombe, which is where I grew up. I grew up and had a lot of friends who were on the lifeboat. They used to go out, and they still do, go out in very dangerous seas and save people who get into trouble. And because it's my hometown in my heart, in my spirit, we're going to actually play, my studio, we're putting a field of light installation in these 3 fields, and it'll be there for 3 months, and you're all invited to come down. Would you like to ask any question, anybody?
I wanted you to tell us more about Uluru.
Oh, Uluru. I'm doing an installation, it's not dead set yet, but in 2016, which is next year, it's been my passion to take out the field of light to Uluru, which is Ayers Rock, where all those years ago when Serena and I were out there. And I did the Holborn exhibition, and I got a call from Alice Springs, which is weird when you think about it, the difference. And a lady on ABC, Alice Springs, said, "Could you talk about it?" And then this fellow heard me talking and phoned me up and said, I think we should bring your field of light out here. And I said, God, I've been trying to do that for 30 years or whatever it is, 20 years. And that was 3 years ago. And it's been a long, long journey, but I shouldn't say touch wood, we're nearly there. And if you do get to Salcombe, you can always come out and help. So, I mean, I know it's a long way, but you'd be more than welcome. Yeah. Does anybody want to ask any questions?
That was amazing. Just on a really dreary practical note, when you do your field of light, how do you power it?
It's a very good question, and lots of people are interested in the power. We use LED. We used to use halogen or metal halide. Every single one of the lights is split into. So you might have one light source that does 500 stems. So it's very. Generally, it's like lighting a couple of rooms in a fairly big house. No more than that. It's very, very small amount of power.
So you don't use solar power?
Well, actually, for the Ayers Rock one, we are using, and again, that's a good question, because there's not power on the site, and we designed a special solar panel array. Or another company did. They're helping us on that. But actually, they're putting solar in the Uluru area at the moment for the tourism. There's a village there called, I can't remember the name, but they will be hooking up to that power, yeah.
Sorry to talk about money, but your work is so innovative. Do you have difficulty in letting customers or yourself know how much it's going to cost in advance?
I've worked making things really from my early 20s, because Sydney was very important for me, and so I learnt a lot. I'm not the most practical person in one way, but I always understand about making things. That's been my life. So generally, we will always tell a client how, particularly on private commissions. But that was more on the design side. With the art installations, with the gardens and the museums, they just say, go for it. And I don't want to spend money unnecessarily. So for me, I'd rather do a piece of work and realise it than make money out of it. And there's obviously a fine balance with my family, because they're always going, Dad, you've got to make some, a living. But we do okay.
That's fascinating, thank you. I want to know how you store your ideas. I mean, do you store them still in Sketchpad for
Yes.
And I'd love to see a picture of your studio. I mean, do you have stuff there, or are you very orderly in your...
I'm a bit of both, in that I have sketchbooks which I've had for years. They're like journals, and I go to them and I look back at them, and for me it's like cut grass. You can open a page and I've only written 2 or 3 words and a little scribble, but I'm right back 20 years ago and I can see it. I know where I was. It's very weird. That's my own notation. So I don't use computers a lot. I mean, all my team, we've got 13 in the studio now. They're brilliant. I mean, they're young. I'm the old dinosaurs, so they're going, but they do things very differently to me. But I think that I can show them things and they can show me things. So it's been, yeah.
You mentioned cut grass there. Is smell one of the things that inspires you as well?
I think there's so many things that get you. I mean, whatever leads you into thinking for something. So it could be cut grass. I just think that for me, that my eyes have always been. I'll just give you an example. When I was about 7 or 8, actually, early time in Salcombe, I remember I was walking into town because my father lived outside, and the stone walls were a bit higher than my head, so I couldn't look over and see the beautiful view. And I remember most of the journey to town was looking at the road, and I suddenly realised that there was beauty in a road. I mean, I know that sounds a weird thing to say, but, as a kid, a road is grey or black, when they say paint a road. And I remember sort of stopping at a drain and looking at the textures and the colours and and I always thought it was a secret. And it took me 40 years to realise that it wasn't no secret. It was what was in front of your nose. But, I thought there was some sort of special secret to all of this. And there's no secret. Art is very truthful and very, very accessible for us all. It's not this, in the club type of thing. There's always this sort of secrecy, and it's a load of rubbish when people do that. Sorry, but
Any other questions?
Yeah, do you look at the recent sort of that show in the Tower of London?
Beautiful.
Beautiful, and it strikes me as very close to your work.
Well, that's very encouraging. I mean, that's such a beautiful idea. I mean, all people that do that sort of work, I love. I mean, they're making the world brighter and more. It's just such a pleasure, isn't it? And there's always people who knock things, and it doesn't really matter. You just got to get on and forget that.
Well, that's the other thing about the comparison between your work and the poppies, is that it's so ephemeral. The poppies are not there anymore, but like so much of your...
It goes. And one of the things to working in gardens for me has been very important, is when it's a great privilege to be able to work in some of these places. And what I realised is when people walk through the door in a garden or walk through the gate, I've watched them for months, and their faces would be, like most of our faces, pretty maybe not so happy. And then at the end of the day, they would be beaming, really happy. And I thought, God, that's the garden. It wasn't anything to do with what we were doing. This was just while we were setting up our exhibition. So that really got me. I thought gardens are special places. And the ephemeral part of making work is lovely because you're not shoving it into people's faces 24/7. You're just putting it there. And when I take my stuff away, it's exciting because somebody else, you leave the garden bare again and it's doing its thing, and then another artist comes along and does his thing or her thing. And I love that. It should be this, not putting these sort of tombstones all over the place,
So do you keep your pieces then and move them round, or
They don't. A lot of the materials degrades after a particular. We lose so much, and you can imagine pulling a field of light out of a place when it's been there for 5 months, and the materials mostly have to be renewed. Some of the bits you can keep. So, it depends what the piece is, but we do move them around. But I always like doing new pieces.
Have you been asked to do anything to the garden here?
Not yet, but I'm hoping. Yeah. Good question. Ivan? Please ask him to. I'd love to, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.